Hi there, I'm Natasha Zouves. Today's guest is not just a decorated pilot. He's a man who has walked through fire, both in the air and on the ground, and has lived to tell the story. Major Glenn Ignazio is a retired U.S. Air Force Special Operations pilot and combat rescue officer. He's been behind enemy lines, rescuing fellow warriors in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. But his most powerful mission began, he says, after the uniform came off. He starts by talking about a harrowing mission in the middle of a sandstorm, one in which he was not able to save a fellow American soldier, and how it's left him haunted. Here's our conversation. Major Glenn Ignazio, it's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Great to be with you again.
Tell me a little bit about being in Air Force Special Operations, because you say it is a branch a lot of people don't know about. Tell me about what you would do regularly and what were the stakes? How dangerous was the work?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people don't know that there's special operations, or what we call special warfare, in the Air Force, and it's comprised of pararescue, combat control, special reconnaissance, and tactical air control parties. So those are the ones that wear the berets. They don't operate as their own teams, but they could be associated with a SEAL team or SEAL Team 6 this month, and a Green Beret or Delta Force next month. So there's not many of us. So we only get attached to those units. My job was a pilot. My son's in that beret wearing, pipeline. He's going down that path. But I was just a pilot. But how do these teams get in? So how does SEAL teams, Green Berets, and all them get in and out of the situation? That's our job. So a lot of places we are in locations we shouldn't be. At the same time, one of the fortunate things is we get to do combat rescue. And combat rescue is getting people out of bad situations, whether it be pilots or I say other assets, intelligence folks, SEALs, Green Berets, just like I said, in a bad situation. As far as dangerous, yeah, we're doing different areas. We're blacked out at night. We have no lights on outside the aircraft, very little inside, and we fly treetop level so that we're not detected, because how do these SEAL teams, Beret teams, and everything get in and out? Again, that's usually done covertly, and that's the job.
Wow. Okay. So in Air Force Special Operations, you are attached to a SEAL team or to Green Berets, for example, and you're responsible for bringing those teams in covertly into areas they're not supposed to be in, and also rescue missions, bringing out those individuals as well and getting them out of harm's way. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the perfect summary for it. We're sort of the delivery service and the extraction service for those folks. Perfectly
Wow.
said.
You write about a specific extraction mission that didn't go correctly, that took place during a sandstorm. Could you take us back to what happened there?
Yeah, sure. It was actually the lead up to, what we'd say the second war in 2003, before we breached the berms into Iraq. And what unfortunately happened was, during these mission planning or mission rehearsals that we do, the U.S. Army was flying a Black Hawk helicopter, and we fly again, and then they fly with night vision. So there's no lights on. And unfortunately, it was a very dark night. We had a massive sandstorm that kicked up in the area. And on the border of Kuwait and Iraq, there's these, what we call tank berms. They're sand berms. It could be up to 50 feet tall. And it's literally a mound, or almost like a mountain, a small mountain, a hill, whatever, of sand and dirt. And during the sandstorm, as conditions were getting worse, this helicopter unfortunately hit the berm and it crashed. And so again, our job is to get people out of harm's way. And they were less than 20 miles away. So flying, you're talking about moments away. But we couldn't go on the ground because there's minefields. It was, rough areas, just couldn't do it on the ground. So again, we're trying to do this by air. The hard part is, we taxied out and we're sitting on the runway, and the sandstorm is so bad that we can barely see. And we're right on the edge of, do we do this or do we not do this? The hard part as well is that we have certain surveillance assets flying around that can see through these things. My position as pilot, and one of the others, we have a communications operator. Him and I had the communications link to one of these airborne assets, and they were able to give us sort of the visual of what was going on. And they said that the crash happened, the helicopter's on fire, and there's individuals that are crawling, or an individual crawling away. So there is somebody live.
So there is one person who's crawling away from the wreckage. Is that correct?
That's right. That's what they saw. And so we taxi out. It's dark. The sandstorm is massive. We're trying to get our helicopters out. We're trying to get out. And we're just sitting there, engines running, trying to take off. And now you have to think about this, is that, do we take off and hurl ourselves into this and possibly lose our lives? But at the same time, this is all we do. This is our mission. This is what we're there for. And so as they're explaining this, your heart is just pounding, and it is very emotional because you're trying to figure out, I want to get this individual. This guy is possibly by himself, crawling on the ground, on a fire in a crash that he just occurred. And so we had to sit there and we finally had to make the decision not to. And so I think about it as difficult as I can say it, as if you're sitting across from me at a table and somebody's doing something horrifically to you, and I can't do anything about it. I have to sit there and watch it happen. That's what it felt like. The hard part after that, and the thing that lingers, is that we made the decision, we're not going to go. And when they did that, the timing was pretty bad, because at that point, just few moments later, is the overhead asset said that he stopped crawling. So try to get through this, but basically he expired on the desert floor. And so it's hard to experience that and go through that. I'm very graphic in person, so I literally have this image in my head of this happening, and there's no way that you can't feel like you're responsible, even though as difficult of the choice it was. And so it carries with you like there's a responsibility for me. After that, we had a taxi back. In fact, it was so bad, we had to have an individual walk in front of us to actually follow that individual to get the airplane back, to give you an idea how bad conditions were. The other tough part about what we do is, and other people have even more horrific stories, is that we have to compartmentalize it. So as soon as we do that and shut down, we literally have to spool up for possibly another mission when the weather clears. That could be a half an hour, it could be 15 minutes, who knows? So you literally have to cap that, compartmentalize it, and push that down and be ready for the next thing that could occur. But it's hard to sit there when they're just moments away. And that example of you sitting across the table and somebody doing something, you're sitting as helpless as you can. And those emotions pop up and you bury them. And unfortunately, they come out many years later.
And I can see even these years later, even retelling that story is really difficult for you. What is coming up for you? I mean, what is the feeling in your body as you're recounting that?
Yeah, I mean, you get on the edge of, tears. It is tough because, like I said, you carry that responsibility, and I've gone through as much PTSD, programs and so forth, really good, to deal with it. Yeah, so it's emotional because it almost comes back. Again, being a visual person, it's like you're feeling and you're seeing these emotions all over again. And that's the hard part through these things, is, again, you bury them for so long.
I understand.
So yeah, it's almost like you're reliving a thing. It's very, very tough.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing it with us. And tell me more about that. The decision in that moment, I would imagine, I mean, you got into this line of work because it is so important to you to be able to rescue your fellow Americans and to be able to go in there and help when you can. It must have been excruciating to just be sitting there and to be the decision maker and not to jump in and do what you're there to do. What was the calculus in the end that made the difference? Is it that it was simply too dangerous and you would jeopardize other American lives, including your own, by going in?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the decision that was made. It's just not myself. It's also the entire crew, but we're taking all the information in, and what can we do? And so you have to sort of break the emotions and go logic. And to me, this is me, is I feel if you have the emotions and the logic and they're not in sync, that's when you have a lot of emotions and chaos. And I feel like that was the case. And so you're sitting there, and the whole thing was, if we do this, the potential of us losing our lives. And we have 5 crew members on board that aircraft, plus pararescue special forces. So you're putting their lives at the line. But we all know that this is exactly what our job is. This is what we exist in that deployment, in that mission for. And so that's it. So that is 100% your responsibility, and then you're not able to do it. And you graphically hear somebody has expired, or basically died.
Yeah.
That's hard. If it was a crash and they didn't survive is one thing, but when there is a survivor and you can't get them, that's the tough part.
I understand the way that this has really haunted you. And it's also interesting. You describe really compartmentalizing this for 16 years. And then it hits all at once inside of the house of a Gold Star mother. Can you tell me about what happened?
Oof, just thinking of that actually gets the most emotions, because that's when it came up. At first it was interesting because, there was only one other in person and myself listening to this and hearing this description. And the rest of the crew was focused on other things. And so there was two of us. And the hard part for me was even talking about it because I didn't even say anything because it was like, well, what do the others think? Am I overreacting? Am I too emotional? So I never said anything. And I kept us at bay and you sort of moved on. So I wouldn't say that you forgot about it, but it pushed it back. But when I knew there were, issues to face, I knew not just this event, but other things that, you're exposed to it. And, I have my son in the military and I asked him, hey, did I ever show anything or do anything? He goes, no, I knew there was a lot of stuff there, but it never really came out. But what happened was I was at a birthday party and I walked into this birthday party and on the wall, she had a uniform framed, U.S. Army soldier uniform framed, and it was her son's. And I asked her, I said, oh, where's he stationed? Or, what's he do? And she goes, oh, I'm a Gold Star mom. My son was killed in Iraq. And as soon as she said that, I, apologized, said thank you, and I stepped away and I went to the bathroom and I just completely lost it, completely broke down because not thinking about it, it's that many years later. And in a snap of a finger, all I could think of was he the one. And so
Was he the one
again,
who was
was
lost on
he the
that
one on the
mission?
ground? Right. Right. And so, yeah, it was really, really tough. Again, 16 years, you don't think about it. One snap of a finger comment, it comes back like it just happened. And that's how these things work. I don't think a lot of people understand it. It's different for everybody, but imagine how deep and how buried that is, yet as quickly as it could come up as if it's just happening.
Ugh.
That's what happened to me. And that's highlighted that, okay, you got to do something about this because of exactly the speed and the effect and the
Yeah.
impact it had at that moment.
So you have this moment where PTSD rears its ugly head. And separately from that as well, there was a really frightening high altitude incident that happened that you say not only ended your career, it almost took your life. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, some of these stories that lay out. So what happened was basically some of the things that we do, like what I was telling you about these special forces teams and special operation teams, is they do high altitude jumps. So we'll be at high altitude and they jump out the back and they open their parachutes and they glide to targets for miles. So we do this. Of course, you're decompressed at that time. But before you do this, something we do in the military as aviators is we do altitude chambers. Altitude chamber takes you up 30, 35,000 feet and they give you basically hypoxia. And the reason why that's important is that if anything's happening because an oxygen mask or something, especially as a pilot, you have certain symptoms. Like yours would always be the same. If your lips get tingly and your fingers get tingly, they'll always be the same. And mine are always the same. And so they're training so you identify that. Well, the hard part about this is that when you go up from sea level to the high altitude, it's the same as a diver deep underwater that comes to the surface. It's called the bends. And we do everything. We breathe oxygen and everything to prevent this. And it's like opening a bottle of ginger ale. When you take the cap off, you see the bubbles come out. And that's because pressure comes out. So I know a long explanation, trying to keep it as simple as possible. But at that altitude, what happened was for me is for some reason, there were still nitrogen bubbles in my body and those bubbles came out and they got caught in the brain, the spinal cord, the left hip area. And so it caused nerve damage. The left hip has been replaced twice and I lost a little peripheral vision. The body of the left side's weaker than the right, almost like a stroke. So these things can kill you. And mine was delayed, so it started coming on slowly. The next night, I was supposed to fly and do this mission. And if I did this training mission, that tiny little bubble you could barely see would be the size of a golf ball because we're, again, up at altitude. They change, they're small down and they get bigger up at altitude. So imagine if that was in the brain, I'd be dead. So unfortunately, or fortunately, which way you would look at it, the next day I was basically incapacitated and was rushed to Travis Air Force Base, and they put me in a chamber 100 feet down to squeeze these bubbles back into small form to get out. But at the same time, again, got caught in the brain, spinal cord, left hip is all metal and replaced. Pretty tragic situation. Some people die, some people have the smallest thing. But for me, it did permanent damage and it ended my career literally overnight.
Oh my gosh. So, as it was happening when you went up that first time, were you aware that something was different and something was wrong?
Didn't even know. We did it, came back, and the base that I did it at was about 3 hours away from where I live. So I drove home afterwards and, got out of the car a little stiff, thinking, that's just the drive, stretching out. And it was funny because my wife at the time says, you don't know how to stretch. You're going to hurt yourself, right? I'm just joking around. The next day I wake up and I'm like, oh, she's right. And then later I was incapacitated where the pain was so bad. It was ridiculous. And I don't know how to explain it. But it just got progressively worse. And then the decision was made to actually send me to the Air Force Base as an emergency. A lot of things I was supposed to probably be put in an ambulance and on oxygen and
Yeah.
everything. Didn't know. My unit didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
So literally drove to Travis and damage was done within the first hour and I never had a clue.
My gosh. And you had done this before. Is there any do you have any idea why it happened this time?
I don't know. I mean, it happens. There's a altitude or decompression accident or event, I should say, that
Yeah.
happens to 1% of all military aviators each year.
Yeah.
Fighter pilots, you name it. And they might have a little pain in their elbow or whatever from something like this to somebody could be killed. So it happens all the time. They check the equipment, they checked everything, have no idea. I mean, I did a mini triathlon the weekend before. Did I have a torn muscle that held nitrogen? I mean, they're speculating it could be like that, but there was nothing solid for equipment or anything that would have
I
shown
see.
why this did this.
How many years had you served at that point?
Oof, I enlisted in '86. I was 17. Parents had to sign the paperwork because I was still a minor. 6 years enlisted, and then as an officer, got out. Let me see, I was retired out in 2008, so that's just about 22 years.
Wow. And this is obviously not the way that you saw your career ending. You write, the sudden transition out of uniform was a significant challenge, more difficult than some may understand. One day I was flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft with people's lives in my hands, and the next day I was unemployed. The feeling of isolation and uncertainty was overbearing. Tell me more about that. What was that transition like all at once?
Uh, yeah, man, it hits you like a ton of bricks. I mean, the words that you use, even my explanation, and probably wouldn't capture the emotional impact of it. Uh, but I wanted to be a pilot since I was 4 years old. I honestly remember it way back. We didn't have money, so that's why I enlisted, and 6 years of fighting just to get to that slot and get the pilot slot. So my whole life was driven to be a pilot. And then you're in the Air Force, and it's interesting is if you talk to anybody in any of the services, they say, I'm in the Marine Corps, I'm in the Air Force, so I'm in the Army. You're in. I don't work for them. I'm in. So you're part of
Yeah.
something. For
Yeah.
me, that was always the case, something bigger than me. So when I went from being the pilot that I wanted to, and you're flying this great airplane and doing this great mission, and literally in a snap of the fingers, it's like, you're unemployed. You're a pedestrian now. It's as if you were never in. When I say monumental, it's literally like everything's been stripped for you, your entire
Yeah.
identity. I think no matter what I did for a career, say in Silicon Valley or whatever, I was always saying, yeah, I was an Air Force pilot. That's what I
Yeah.
always went back to. So you lose that identity, but at the same time, you're now out of a situation. You're out of the Air Force. You're out of the unit. You
Yeah.
lose that. It's a loss. And so that's hard to really understand and prosecute that you were doing something so significant. And then now you're a pedestrian.
And you went through something that so many Americans can relate to, which is in the course of treatment for that catastrophic high altitude event that happened, you were given pain management that spiraled out of control. Can you share what happened there?
Yeah, I think this is a challenge thing that people don't understand. First of all, was with doctors and everything, but bottom line is I was telling you about those bubbles and damage and everything. And so what happened was my left hip, basically all the cartilage deteriorated. So almost immediately I'm like a 90-year-old with a hip, and then eventually all the cartilage went to nothing. So it was all bone on bone.
Mm.
And I will definitely say that bone pain is probably one of the most painful things you can experience. Lily was vomiting from the pain.
Mm.
It's like, it didn't pass out, thankfully, but maybe that would have been better. So of course they're giving you pain medication, and because of severity, oxycodone. And the way the body works is that, you start with 5 and you give it a week or so and it's not working. So they go to 10 and they go up. And the reason for that is because the brain's trying to take control. So they have to give you more. So anyways, the pain was bad. It took a while to, months or whatever, a couple months to actually find out I have to get it replaced. So finally, I'm trying to maintain that pain, had the full surgery. They replaced it. Everything looks good. You're on pain medication after the surgery because, you're talking about a major joint, the upper femur, the entire area is completely replaced. And then you're thinking, okay, this is getting great. Well, it felt great, but then it started getting worse again. And the reason why it got worse was the joint was put in and slipped. Basically, it was off a few degrees.
Mm,
And so it started shredding everything
mm.
from underneath up. So I had the injury, cartilage is gone. You have the replacement, and then on the replacement, it's damaging me. So we had to go another year before the hip was replaced again. So we're talking about that 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Again, managed with a doctor, and we're all looking at it, and they're already telling me after the first couple of weeks, hey, you're going to have to go through a program because it only takes 5 to 7 days of every day managed, every so many hours for this type of medication to you to get hooked. And so it was 22 total months, and those 5, 10 milligrams turned out to be 240 milligrams of pure oxycodone a day.
My God.
So at the end of it, so let's push the surgeries to the side. Now we're coming off of it. Literally was with the program, Stanford Medical, phenomenal. They really helped me step down, and you're going 240, lower, lower, lower. And finally got to about 10, 15 milligrams. And I'm like, I'm done. And I just stopped with them. The hard part is you go through the withdrawals. Now, oxycodone is an opiate, opium, heroin, all the same. You go through the withdrawals just like somebody does
Yeah,
that's
what was
shooting
that
heroin on the
like?
streets.
What was that like?
Oh, it was probably the worst, most challenging thing I've ever been through. First of all, you're vomiting. You don't know when you're literally walking around with depends on because you have no idea when you're going to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's that bad, and
Wow.
I have no problem sharing it because you have no idea. The body's shaking, really creepy crawlies. You feel like things are crawling all over your body.
Ugh.
You're tired, you're awake, you're sweating, you're freezing. It goes back and forth. All these withdrawal symptoms, nightmares you can last at least 5 days. I would
Mm.
say at least 5 days. And so it's intense. You literally feel like you're going insane. It was very, very difficult. And
I mean,
honestly, I don't know how people do it on the streets.
did you draw on some of your training, honestly, and your mental fortitude to get through this?
I do remember, okay, I got to focus on what the end game is. The end game is to get off this stuff. And, the small little victories is what I talk about a lot in the chapter. And in general, when I'm talking is I had to set one little goal is like, my God, I hope I just get through tomorrow. I hope I can just eat tomorrow. And so that was the precipice of just not that, but actually to get to walk again, to get through this. But it is absolute a nightmare. And to let anybody know is that this wasn't by choice. This was, one of the things never did anything recreational. This just was happened from a surgery. So it can happen to anybody. I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't matter what demographic you're from. But it was absolutely horrific to go through. And actually, there was something after that called post-acute withdrawal syndrome that sort of kicked my butt for a few more months after that.
How many days did it take to detox?
I would say it took about 5 days to go through this really bad situation. But the thing is to say detox, I would say that that's probably when the medications were out of you, but there's a psychological effect. So for example, if you got a paper cut, it probably felt like your arm was amputated because all this pain has been sequestered for so long that the
My
brain's
gosh.
now on high speed. So you have that every time you feel pain, the brain and psychologically wants the opiate immediately. So you have to consciously fight that off. And I did that. And it was really interesting because after a while, I was finally getting better and I'd go to the gym, work out. You know how you get that soreness if you haven't been to the gym for a while? Well, guess what?
Mm.
Sure enough, pain. Body says, I want one. I'm like, no. Next day, I woke up lethargic, like I had the flu, like I was in light withdrawals. And for some reason, that was happening every time I was in the cycle, feeling better, pain keeps on happening. And I went probably 6 months. I was losing my mind. And I had what's called post-acute withdrawal syndrome. I have never been on any drug like this in my life. And now the body in the brain was saturated with it, that every time I felt pain, the brain was looking for it. So when it didn't
Wow.
get it, it put me in light withdrawals.
So did you ever return to it because your body was demanding it afterwards, or did you successfully keep off of it?
Kept off of it. In fact, I didn't know what was going on. Again, this went about 6 months. And so I went to the VA at that time, and I said, hey, I don't know what's going on. And told them what was going on with the opiates and what I went through. They're the ones that told me about this pause thing. And they gave me this, I think of the name of the medication, but basically it's like a couple milligrams. and I had to take it, and it was just enough to trick the brain. So it wasn't oxycodone or anything like that. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it was just enough to trick the brain. And, I looked great. I looked horrible. And then all of a sudden, color comes back to my body. It was like all the colors came back. So it was this medication that I had to take for a while, but never
Yeah.
went back to it. Did not want to go back to it. Not at all.
So how long in total did it take you to get completely back to normal?
Oof. So if we talk about that plus the post acute, I would say probably a good 8 months till I was feeling okay. Even though I was taking that little medication, it was probably a good 6 to 8 months where that cycle wasn't happening and I was operating like a normal individual again.
And you're off that little bit of medication now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, we have an enormous fentanyl issue in this country, an opiate issue. What insight do you have into that now from your perspective that you didn't have before?
First of all, what people go through, like again, never been on anything like this. I never knew the impact of how this stuff would affect you. I mean, my father smoked cigarettes and I'm like, just quit and not even know what addiction like. Now I get it. And now something like an opiate is absolutely, overwhelmingly powerful. So to never criticize somebody that is hooked on this. I don't know how people on the street that are doing heroin could possibly come after this and come off of this, considering what I was going through,
Mm,
medicated and with the doctors.
mm,
It's mind boggling. So the judgment of somebody that's on this medication, I just don't do. The awareness, the post-acute withdrawal syndrome and making sure you're supportive, because like I said, is that I was going through that and I had friends and family members thinking that you're on drugs again or something
yeah.
like that, is never judge anybody. So I've actually given speeches to doctors, DEA, FBI, telling them about this and post-acute withdrawal so they can have awareness to this, that, hey, this might be something different than somebody that's a recreational drug user.
Yeah.
So that was incredibly eye-opening to me. And again, how quickly this can happen and how people can turn to illicit drugs as well, based on an experience I had in that group program listening to some other
Yeah.
folks.
I mean, could you understand that path? I mean, it seemed like you were determined. You knew that you needed to get off of this and you were determined to detox. But could you understand how someone could go from being legally medicated under the, guidance of a doctor, that dosage goes up and up and up, and then they have to resort to other things?
Yeah, perfect question, because I actually call that out in the chapter I wrote. So I was in this group. This group was comprised of all different services, all different individuals. Didn't matter if you were supply or special forces. And there was actually a guy that was special forces. He had a major injury. He was on these opiates very extensively as well. He was with the VA program in a different state. Hey, I've been good with the VA. Some states are different than others. His just cut him off. So
Hmm.
he went from a high dose and didn't whittle down and was cut off. So he's going through living hell.
Hmm.
He's walking into an appointment and somebody offered him heroin, said, hey, this will stop it for you. And in that mental situation, that physical, it is mentally and physically overwhelming. I
Hmm.
can't understate that. And unless you experience it, you won't even understand a gravity of what I'm saying. And he turned to it. So he took it, got away from his sickness. It made him feel okay. But guess what? He's now hooked on heroin. The reason why I say this was a very elite individual. He was, I could just see in his face that he just was so rejected and he felt damaged. We would tell our story once a week. Somebody would get up and tell their story. And I'm telling my story, what happened. And he looks at me and he goes, I thought you were a member of the staff. I'm like, oh, hell no, dude. I'm one of you guys.
Yeah.
And he looked at it. He's like, oh my God. So then we talked. And the idea that he was putting himself down, and for whatever reason, I don't care. Again, this happens to lawyers, it happens to janitors, homeless, educated, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He put himself down so bad that I swear he looked like he was spiraling to the edge of suicide.
Hmm.
We talked afterwards and he felt better about himself. Like, I'm not this reject, this piece of crap.
Hmm.
And that was the aha moment for me. Because again, back in the rescue side, I really didn't even think about it. You're making me connect things. Is I feel like I helped this guy,
Yeah.
and that's all that it took for me to say, I'm telling this story. I don't care. I don't have any kind of reservations, ego, or crap to it.
Mm.
This is too important. So
That's
that was the
incredible.
aha moment for me.
And I'm glad you bring that up, that, in going through your own PTSD journey and being really open about that, in going through this journey, in, serious substances and sharing that, the rescue mission continues. And I want to ask you about that. First of all, knowing what you know now, having done the work that you've done now, what would you have told yourself after the Sandstorm event that happened?
I think one of the, if I remember this, first of all, Wounded Warrior Project helped me out greatly, and they sent me to Rush Medical for 3 great week program in Chicago. And the thing that I learned, and they really said is, imagine if the person that you couldn't save was in the back of the room. What would they say to you? And in that, understanding everything that was going on, they probably would have forgave you because they would have never blamed you in the first place.
Mm,
It still gets emotional, but you start letting go of that made this happen. I wasn't the one who caused him to lose his life. That's how you have to separate it.
yeah. Yeah. And that you saved other lives that day by not going in at all, that you decided not to jeopardize your entire crew for a mission that did not seem like it would have been successful. I appreciate you sharing that. And what do you want everyone to know? I mean, I think a lot of people could look at your career and be like, wow, what a badass thing to do, to be attached to these Green Beret and SEAL team units, to, be bringing people in to dangerous places you shouldn't be in, and to be bringing people out to go on missions in dangerous stormy seas and pluck out people from the tentacles of the ocean and save people's lives. What do you want people to understand about what it has been like to walk this path?
It doesn't matter where you come from, your demographic, race, color, creed. I mean, seriously, that is the people that sat next to me in the pilot seat and everything. You know, they can save you and they can fly you into the ground. It doesn't matter who, what, how much money they got, or anything. And so when I see that, it's like, yeah, I mean it. And it's true that you can get wherever you want to go if you have the grit to get there and the
Mm,
drive to get there. Mine was a certain situation. That's why I enlisted and worked myself through college, because we didn't have anything. But I think it's the determination and the grit. I think it was after my career that I really took inventory of what I did and how important it was. And I
mm,
wish I realized that more when I was in it. And
mm,
so, I think that's the easiest thing. And as I said, small victories, if I just said, I'm going to be a pilot, that was a big leap. I needed to take these small steps. Like after my injury, what am I going to do with my career? That's a big jump. I just wanted to walk again. And I sort of tell it out in chapters. Like, I just want to be in a walker. Okay. I just want to be in a cane. I just want to be able to get out on my own. And that's how I did it. So it's the small victories, but don't lose track of the goal. So long-winded answer, but I hope that sort of helps, is don't underestimate yourself. Have the grit. Don't judge yourself, as small damn victories, and keep the big goal and focus. That
mm.
seems to be the powerful thing for me in reverse.
And if people want to connect or find out more or read this story for themselves, where can they do that?
This is the book. It's called Wounds to Wisdom. Sarah Carell is the one that pulled this all together. Interesting enough is all the authors are here on the back. You can see all the pictures of them. And what it is it's a book of both military, Gold Star mothers, first responders, of the situations that they have gone through and how they've recovered. And it's the first time Scott Mann, who people know from getting people out of Afghanistan, he wrote that this is the first time he's seen a book that covers all those areas from cover to cover to help individuals. So it's not just a military book. It's not just a law enforcement. It covers everything, including Gold Star families.
Major Glenn Ignazio, what an honor, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the honor. I appreciate it for telling the story.